इधर से कोई दिक्कत
हाँ.
कर दिया मैंने।
Hello everyone. Today I, Agrim Jain, along with my partner Gaurav Dabas, are going to present ourselves on the topic sexually transmitted diseases.
Hello everyone, I am Gaurav Dabas. Today we will take you to this journey of sexually transmitted diseases.
So these are the topics that we are going to cover in our presentation. First is the syphilis disease, in which we will be telling about the introduction and the symptoms of the disease, pathophysiology of the disease, the diagnosis and the treatment of the disease. Following the same pattern, we will cover up gonorrhea and AIDS. And in the last, we will be talking about a research question which will be used as our out of the box study for the topic.
So at first we will discuss what are the STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. These are the infections that are passed from one person to another through sexual contact. The cause of STDs are bacteria, parasites, viruses. There are more than 20 types of STDs. We have discussed three of the major STDs. These are syphilis, gonorrhea, and AIDS. You will see further in the next slides about syphilis, gonorrhea, and AIDS.
So the first disease in STDs is the syphilis, whose causative agent is Treponema pallidum. Uh, so what basically syphilis is? Syphilis is a bacterial infection that is spread through sexual contact, as we know, and this disease starts as a painless sore, typically on your genital areas or rectum or your mouth. So sores are basically type of, you can say, painful pimples or acne, and this could be seen in the starting in the initial phase of the syphilis, and it spreads from person to person via skin or mucous membrane through contact with the sores. And in the initial infection, the syphilis bacteria remain inactive in your body for decades, which becomes active after a long stage. It means that you will be infected, but you will remain dormant as you will not come to know about this disease. Second thing is that early detection can be cured, but sometimes it could be damaging your organs like brain, heart, or any other vital organ, because if syphilis is remained untreated in the initial phase. And syphilis can also pass from the mothers to the fetus, as it is a transferable disease from the mother. So the symptoms of the syphilis disease, they occur in three stages. First stage is it is confined to the site of infection. Like if it has infected your genital area or rectum or mouth, it will remain confined to that area. It will not pass on to the other areas. Then second is that there are painless, clean based, undurated ulcer on glands of penis or rectum or lips or tongue or nipples. So you'll see those painless clear ulcers, or you can say pimples over these areas. They will be painless, but you will feel them that they are present there for quite a long time, and they usually last for 2 to 4 weeks time. In the second stage, when the body has been affected wholly by the syphilis bacteria, it will show its impact after 1 to 12 months. A skin rash will appear all over your body, and you can see that inside your mouth you can see a rash, or you can say a sort of hive of blisters. Then at this point you will feel the fever, and it is highly infectious, so it is very painful and it's very harmful for you during the second stage. Then comes the third stage, where you will see that after the symptom free period, like as we have discussed in the introduction, that they remain dormant inside your body. So the bacteria will remain dormant in your body, but suddenly the bacteria will become active and it will act brutally on your body. And some of the major symptoms that you will observe are that there are slow growing abscesses, and there are cardiovascular and CNS disorders which are affecting your body. So let us now discuss the pathophysiology or the mode of action of the disease.
So pathophysiology for syphilis is as the following. First of all, inoculation with Treponema palladium, which is the causative agent for the syphilis disease. As it is a contagious disease, it can transfer through direct contact with the infected lesion from the infected person. It can be acquired through sexual contact or the congenital, that is from the in utero or mother infection. First of all, it will penetrate into mucous membrane and microscopic abrasion and skin. There is an incubation period of about 10 to 90 days. That is the prior infection and the time it will take to first appear of the symptoms. There is gap of 10 to 90 days. That is 3 months. Uh, that is called as primary syphilis. It will locate to the lymphatic infiltration. For it will cause regional lymphadenopathy. Further on, if the primary stage of the syphilis is left untreated or unresponsive to therapy, it will lead to deterioration of the dermal leukocyte macrophages and lymphocytes infiltrate at the site of infection. It will lead to end arteritis and periarteritis. It is according to the location of the inflammation in the arteries. That is end and peri. Peri means at the parameter and means at the end side of the arteries. That will lead to necrosis and ulceration. So as discussed by my colleague in the symptoms, it will lead to painless chancre, button-like papule evolving to ulceration with raised borders and overlying exudate. Exudate are fluids that pulse out during an infection. It is highly contagious where it can lead to infection to others. Then it will move to stage of secondary syphilis after weeks, months of primary syphilis. Spirochetes, that is bacteria multiply and spread throughout body with varying dermal and systemic manifestations. It will lead to widespread dissemination, causing increase in antibody titers and inflammatory cytokines. So some of the symptoms that will lead from the secondary syphilis is fever, sore throat, weight loss, malaise, anorexia, headache, and lymphadenopathy. If in this stage also secondary stage left untreated or unresponsive, it will lead to latent or tertiary syphilis. Latent means it occurs when secondary syphilis resolves, and it will lead to tertiary syphilis when rare. It is usually occurs months and years after primary lesion. After infiltration caused by the secondary syphilis, that is epidermal hyperkeratosis, capillary proliferation, and endothelial swelling. The symptoms we will usually see is macule lesions, papulous squamous lesions. These are according to the shape acquired by the infection, and condyloma late lesions. Now we will see in further slides about the treatment of syphilis.
Well, as the infection spreads in your body, and you need to confirm yourself with that whether you are really affected by the following bacteria or you have certainly that disease or not. So we have to perform certain diagnostic tests to make sure about the disease. So here are two diagnostic tests that are used for the determination of syphilis in your body. So first is the blood test, where we confirm that the presence of antibodies that body has produced to fight that particular bacteria. We know the mechanism that when a foreign substance enters in our body, our blood, the antibodies present in our body, they trigger the reaction towards that foreign substance to counter that in our body. So if the blood sample of our body collected will have that antibodies, so we will confirm that bacteria has infected your body. But in the second point, as we can see, that antibodies to the syphilis causing bacteria remain in your body for years. So the test can be used to determine current or past infection. So in case if you have treated your past, or you can say the primary infection, but you can still see some amount of antibodies that are in your blood. So this is how this blood test is performed. Second is the cerebrospinal fluid test, where you see that since we have studied in the symptoms part that it affects your CNS. So when you suspect that the nervous system has complications due to syphilis, so your doctor will give you the test for the cerebrospinal fluid, which is done through lumbar puncture or the spinal tap, and the following test will be done to make sure that syphilis is present in your body. Now we shall discuss about the treatment of the syphilis.
In the following section of the treatment regarding the syphilis infection, in the previous stage when it gets diagnosed, if it is treated in early stages, it is easy to cure. But the preferred treatment at all stages is penicillin, an antibiotic medication that can kill the organism that causes syphilis. That it did it makes sure that the causative agent doesn't live anymore. Avoid promiscuity and use of a condom may help prevent infection. Third one, testing and treatment of sexual contacts is vital to prevent reinfection and spread of the disease. It must be make sure that regular routine blood testing of all pregnant women to check the congenital syphilis. And at last, use of antibiotic therapy, that is PPF 6 lakh for 8 days, erythromycin, tetracycline, and doxycycline are the major antibiotic agents that are used in the treatment of syphilis infection. Now
So
we are
that was
moving
also
towards the gonorrhea.
so in the gonorrhea we have the other STDs which has the causative agent Neisseria gonorrhoeae, and we will now study about this bacteria. So gonorrhea is again a bacterial disease which is transmitted sexually and it occurs in both males and females. And gonorrhea most often affects the urethra, rectum, and the throat. And in females, it also infects the cervix. In gonorrhea, it is mostly spread through vaginal, oral, or anal sex. And during the birth of the babies, the disease can be spread from the mother to the children as well. So gonorrhea basically affects the eyes of the babies the most. So this is how gonorrhea is harmful for the fetus. And abstaining from sex, using a condom, and having a mutually monogamous relationship are the best ways to prevent sexually transmitted infections. Since we have to study the symptoms, they will help us to make sure that whether our body is really affected by the gonorrhea or not. So in many cases, gonorrhea infections shows no particular symptoms to the body. But if symptoms occur in our body, they are very limited. They are limited to the sites. So in the male genital tract, for the males, the symptoms are they occur painful urination and a pus-like discharge is there from the tip of the penis, and they can see pain or swelling in one of the testicles. Then in female genital tract, the symptoms are they have increased vaginal discharge, they have painful urination, and vaginal bleeding during periods such as after vaginal intercourse, and last is they face a lot of abdominal or pelvic pain. But apart from these, we can see some of the other major symptoms on other sides of our body. And in rectum, we can see that there is anal itching, there is a pus-like discharge, and there are spots of red color in toilet tissue. In the eyes, you can feel eyes pain, you can see the sensitivity to light, or there is a pus-like discharge from one of your eyes. In the throat, you can see that you are suffering from sore throat, or there are swollen lymph nodes in the neck. And in the joints as well, you can see that the joints are warm, red, swollen, or extremely painful, especially during moving. So let's discuss the pathophysiology of the disease.
While discussing the pathophysiology of the disease, it's very important to understand the process and how the causative agent affects the normal physiology of the person that makes it infectious. So it can be divided into neonatal transmission, if we talk about the transmission, sexual transmission and auto-inoculation. In neonatal transmission, it is during the birth or can be said as congenital. When the patient mucosa with mother's infected mucosa while traveling down the birth canal. And in the sexual transmission, direct contact of patient mucosa with infected mucosa. In auto-inoculation, that is immediate transfer of bacteria to patient mucosa via indirect contact with infected mucosa. All three leads to bacterial components, including pili. Their pili and other proteins allow adherence to host mucosal cells. It leads to the attachment to the mucosal cell surface of the host, and bacterial porins, proteins form pores in host cell membrane, inducing endocytosis. It leads to the deterioration of the host epithelial cells. Now, these bacteria make use of the columnar epithelial cells to invade and replicate. That's how they make use of the host immune response and make it very weak. So, if it's in case successful eradication of the pathogen cleared from host. But if it is not possible in some time cases, bacterial phagocytosis by circulating monocytes. If it's possible that unsuccessful eradication of pathogen, bacteria proteins block phagolysomal fusion and PMN oxidative burst. It leads to the survival and replication within leukocyte phagocytomes. Then if we move further, dissemination of pathogen, then it leads to multifactorial process that leads to the inability to avoid host immunity. Now the bacteria now comes under the resistance that it is not under the host immunity, and now host can't do much. So it leads to five things, that is antigenic variation of protein and LPS on bacteria, masking of gonococcal antigen by LPS prevents binding of bactericidal antibodies and causes incomplete activation of complement system. And third one, molecular mimicry. And fourth one, secretion of IgA proteases, and at last blocking antigen by binding host antibodies to a bacterial reduction modifiable protein, that is RMP. And all five of these leads to the thing that host immunity is avoided by the bacteria. Now it gets resistant and it will show all the signs and symptoms that my colleague discussed in the previous slides of gonorrhea infection.
Well, we have seen the pathophysiology by my colleague. So we need to make sure that whether the gonorrhea infection is there in your body or not. So the doctor will analyze a sample of cells, and these cells are basically collected by urine, and which identifies that whether the bacteria is present in your urethra or not, or by the swab of an affected area, that is from your throat or urethra or vagina or rectum, that is collected and identified for the bacteria. Apart from that, for women, there are certain home test kits which are available for gonorrhea. They include vaginal swabs for self-testing that are sent to the specific lab for testing. So this is basically done for all the women who feels uncomfortable or a little hesitant towards this process. So this is for them, and this is kept very confidential, and you can choose to get your results by email or a text message from the registered authority so as to maintain your confidentiality or your hesitance. Or you can also go for the online results, which can have a free access, or you can also get that from a toll-free number from that particular lab.
Now, if the infection is diagnosed in a patient, then the process of treatment must be made sure to apply as soon as possible. In adults with gonorrhea, these are treated with antibiotics. Now, if some of the infections are emerging at drug resistance, Neisseria gonorrhea, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends that uncomplicated gonorrhea be treated with the antibiotic ceftriaxone given as an injection or with oral azithromycin. If you are allergic to cephalosporin antibiotics such as ceftriaxone, you might be given oral zemifloxacin, effective or injectable gentamicin, and oral azithromycin. Babies born to mothers with gonorrhea, that is, in case of congenital infection, who develop the infection can be treated with antibiotics.
So now we move on to the third STD that we are going to discuss, and it is the very famous and the most common AIDS. And we know the causative agent is human acquired immunovirus, that is HIV. So, as we know, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome is a chronic, potentially life threatening condition caused by human immunodeficiency virus. And it majorly affects your immune system and it interferes with your body to fight with infection and diseases. And it is STI, we all know, and it is spread basically through the contact with infected blood or from mother to child during pregnancy or during childbirth or during breastfeeding. So without medication, it may take years before HIV weakens your immune system to the point that you have AIDS. So this is one thing, that HIV affects your body, but it not necessarily means that it is AIDS. So when it is AIDS, it is a sexually transmitted disease, but HIV can present in your body, can affect any organ and can cause any disease apart from AIDS. Till now, there has been no cure for HIV or AIDS, but there are certain medications that are showing progression for the disease and is increasing your lifetime, your life dependency, and your life availability. So these drugs have reduced AIDS death in many developed nations. And apart from that, it is the most hottest issue and the hottest topic for research for each and every scientist. So we know AIDS is deadly. We know AIDS is very harmful. So what are the basically symptoms of AIDS? How do we come to know? So well, they vary from person to person and from infection to infection, because it is not about AIDS, it is about HIV as well. So depending on the phase of the infection, there are certain symptoms that we can observe. So first is a primary infection, where we have acute HIV infection. So when some people are affected by HIV, they develop a flu-like disease, and which can be healed from 2 to 4 weeks, and it is observed when the virus enters your body. So this illness is called the primary HIV infection, and it only lasts for weeks. Then the symptoms are so mild that you cannot even notice them, and you tend to ignore them because obviously it's just a normal flu. And there is a huge amount of virus in your bloodstream, but is quite high at that time. And as a result, the infection spreads more easily during primary infection than during the next stage. So since during primary infection we don't know about the initiation of the disease, so it is the time when we will give no control or no hold to that disease and it will infect. Then is the clinical latent infection, which is known as chronic HIV infection. And in this stage, HIV is still present in your body and it has now entered your white blood cells. However, many people may not have any symptoms or infections during the lifetime. This stage can last for many years if you are not receiving ART therapy, which is the antiretroviral therapy, and some people develop more severe disease much sooner. So last is the symptomatic HIV infection, when HIV is all around your body and it has taken control of your body. So as this virus continues to multiply and destroy your immune cells, it will decrease the efficiency of your body. It will decrease the efficiency of your immunity to fight with the diseases. And the major symptoms includes fever, fatigue, swollen lymph nodes, often one of the first signs of HIV infection, then diarrhea, then weight loss, oral yeast infection, that is called thrush, shingles, known as herpes zoster, and pneumonia. So these are the three phases, or these are the three stages where we can observe the symptoms for the HIV has infected our body. Now I would now request my colleague to tell us about the pathophysiology of HIV entering in our body.
As Agrim stated in the previous slides, that it's getting a very hot topic for the researchers to understand the proper mechanism, to understand the HIV infections. These persons are going deep in the pathophysiology to understand the process, which will help them to make or invent any type of vaccine or cure for the treatment of HIV infection. So if we talk about the pathophysiology, the HIV first bind to the CD4 cells. These are the primary host cells which they attacks. Then in the internalization process, they make sure that they fully make use of the internal environment and get used to with the conditions. Then leads to the uncoating of the outer layers, which makes sure that reverse transcriptase can help, and reverse transcription can takes place, which can further lead to the making of the DNA molecule, that is integrated proviral DNA. It can lead to two of the infection, that is, first is the productive infection and second is the latent infection. Productive infection leads to the maturation of the HIV production, which will further lead to the cell lysis. Now we will move to the diagnosis of the HIV, which will further help in the treatment of the HIV infection.
So the research and the studies going over HIV is long, and there are certain many tests that have been developed over the years, and we will discuss the three major infections or the three major positive symptoms that could be observed and diagnosed for the diagnosis of HIV. So first is the antigen antibody test, and this test will draw your blood during from an vein, and antigens are substances on the HIV virus itself and are usually detectable and a positive test in a blood within a few weeks after exposure to HIV. And antibodies are produced in the immune system when it's exposed to HIV. Obviously, when a foreign substance enters our body produces antibodies. So that can also be detected. And a combination of antigen antibody test can take 2 to 6 weeks after exposure to become positive. Since the virus remains inactive and active mode, so it will come into its full-fledged form after 6 weeks, which can be performed after its entering of the body. Then comes the antibody test, and these tests look for antibodies to HIV in blood or saliva. And most rapid HIV tests, including self-tests done at home, are antibody tests. So there are certain tools and kits that are available for your self-testing of the HIV. For that, we use the antibody test method. And last, it says that it will take 3 to 12 weeks after exposure to become positive. Then is the nucleic acid test. So these tests look for the actual virus in your blood, and they will involve drawing of blood from your vein. And if you might get exposed to HIV within from past few weeks, your doctor will recommend NAT, that is a nucleic acid test, and the NAT will first test to become positive after exposure to HIV. So I now request Gaurav to tell us about the treatment of the HIV.
Now, to fight with the ongoing HIV infection, it must be make sure that no loopholes must left unmet. So now we should discuss about the treatments available for the infection. But it is said that there is no effective treatment right now. The research is going on for the treatments. Researchers are making sure that they can find a pro-name drug. Avoidance of drug abuse and promiscuous homosexual intercourse can make sure to eliminate the infection, and it can be said that it is a chance of prevention. A recently introduced drug, that is N-butyl deoxynitromycin, however, holds some promise. Currently, AZT, that is azithromycin, which prevents reverse transcription, is used for treatment. In our country, the National AIDS Control Organization, NACO, and other NGOs are doing a lot to educate people about AIDS. So the last point, it directly states that awareness is the main thing that can help in prevention of such STDs. I'm not talking about only AIDS. I'm talking about all of the STDs. Awareness and the education among the people is the primary thing that will help the people to make sure that they do not get affected with these kind of infections. Now, such a thing, now we should move towards a research study that we can talk about, that is STD control and a strategy to prevent HIV infection as well as AIDS. So if we control some of the STDs, it will directly prevent HIV infection, which leads to AIDS. So it will directly help in prevention of AIDS too.
Well, as my colleague has already told about the HIV infection, that can be, we can control the other STDs, and thus we can reduce the chances of HIV to infect our body. And for that, we have certain methods adopted for our research study. And in that, we have studied the PubMed database, which has more than almost 1.5 lakh STDs papers, and they have been cited. So there has been a very vast study, very vast research over this topic, and till the time we could research, we have found out certain information that we could help us to present in this topic. So data has been extracted from the reputed newsletter articles along with the PubMed library. And the most important topic or the most important line that we have come across is that STD as a control measure for the prevention of HIV transmission is evidently reported from various studies across the globe. So what we are trying to convey from this line is that the HIV infection is directly related to somewhat STDs, like we have discussed about gonorrhea or syphilis, or there are other STDs as well. So if we could control those, because those are bacterial, mostly are bacterial infected, if we could control those, we can stop a easy gateway for HIV in our body. So this is the major method that we have adopted and we have studied from all the journals that we have read. Now, what are the essays we have performed, or like what are the methods or what are the studies that we have done? We have seen that HIV is a typically sexually transmitted diseases, and it depends for transmission through sex on contact between raw body tissues of infected and uninfected individuals independent of sexual inclination. So we have, it is evident from the line that the contact and the exposure that two people, one infected and other uninfected, or this is how it can be spread. And enough evidence exists to designate some STDs, especially genital ulcer diseases, as a risk factor for HIV transmission. As we have seen in the previous slides, that ulcer formation at genital areas are the biggest symptom for almost each and every disease, and this can surely make you I beg your pardon. This can surely make you sure that there is some STD or some infection in your genital area or in your body. So you have to avoid the sexual contact with partners so as to avoid that risk of transmission, not only of HIV but also of STDs. Studies have shown that the connection between the presence of HIV and past history of STDs. In this, one study is there where 50% of AIDS cases had a past history of STDs compared to 14% of controls. So this was adopted from one of the journals where we had studied, and this was one of the freshly taken case when the study was done in Tanzania and Rwanda, where the prevalence of a past STD history among AIDS cases were 35% and 70% respectively. So you can see that in Rwanda, it has been the majority cases with past history. But not all STDs may facilitate HIV transmission. A study at a London STD clinic suggests that gonorrhea does not appear to act as a cofactor for HIV transmission. So there are more than 25 STDs present in the world, but some are not actually the gateway for HIV. but we need to make sure that we need to control these STDs, because somehow or the other they are giving a chance for the HIV and increasing the risk for this deadly virus to enter in our body. So this is the study done by us, and now I would like to request my colleague to again tell us what can be the expected outcome or what can be the teaching for the people from this study that we have done.
Thanks, Agrim. For like we will discuss about the expected outcomes here. So all the researches that has been done till now points out one major reason that we can see is the awareness and the education among the people, which they think that is crossing the line and making sure that they are getting infected with such kind of infections. So STD control is based upon prevention through information, education, and communication aimed at reducing the level of unsafe sexual behavior and diagnosing and treating STD. Second thing, syndrome-based STD case management should be integrated into first-level healthcare services in the public and private sectors to develop effective, accessible, and acceptable services to people at increased risk of infection with STD. The support of specialized STD clinics and STD specialists will be needed. So, as we points out towards the awareness and education to the people, they must make sure that if in any hospital, STD clinics and STD specialist rooms are available or the treatment is available, they don't get away from these kind of treatments. They must show that they make aware other people about these infections too. So for the primary thing that should be adopted is sexual behavior changes are needed. We need to change our behavior towards these things and make sure that we study every individual about these things so that as a society we can make some contribution towards elimination of these kind of infections from the society.
So these are the references that we have used for our fruitful presentation that we are present in front of you. And thank you guys. That's all from our side. And this is me, Agrimjan, signing off. Stay safe, stay happy.
Thanks a lot everyone. Stay safe.